Listen up. There's no more excuses. We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Mr. Todd Hartley is in the house. If you're not familiar, Todd is a Tony Robbins business mastery keynote speaker, best-selling author, entrepreneur, and has helped sales teams win over $6 billion in revenue last year. Todd, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys, I'm super excited. I can't even tell you. I'm like fired up and ready to get into information that'll impact lives.
Excited. That's amazing. Can't wait to have you. So first thing I got to ask before I ask about your journey is how did you get into the become a Tony Robbins keynote speaker?
It's so crazy. Well, at 12, I struggled with learning disabilities and dyslexia, and what comes of that was depression and frustration and humiliation as you find yourself in all the slow kid classes. My grandfather recognized that there was something good going on inside me, but there was a big gap between where my vision was and where my skills were. I could barely read. Writing was out of the question. And my grandfather started reading with me Tony Robbins' first book when it came out, Unlimited Power. And Pop and I went through that material so often that I kind of rewired my brain. And I realized there was a lot more to me than the assessment that the educators had. So fast forward years later, I just became a Tony follower and was somebody that I deeply admired. And sometime around 2018 or 2000, we became I have a marketing agency that's, been around for 14 years now. But back then, his company reached out and asked me to do some marketing for them. And so we started working on a couple of really cool key projects, and that went really well. And then the pandemic kicked in, and he reached out and asked me if I could teach his sales teams. Dude's got a lot of businesses that he's personally invested in. And I trained 105 of his personal businesses, the sales teams, how to use video in their sales process. Revenue went through the roof. By the way, this is when we were all quarantined. Like I went to the office and set up when, there was nobody there. And so his sales teams were all quarantined, and they were worried about the long-term success of their business like everybody else. And they started using my strategies. Revenue went through the roof. And then he came back to me and he was like, brother, you've got to start teaching this to people all over the world. And he just pushed me out onto the stage. And I don't think he can get me off the stage now. I just enjoying it so much. And what's great about it is, I was kind of born in his mission, and his psychology became my psychology. And now I get to help extend that mission at his events. And it's a real incredible honor of a lifetime.
What a full circle moment. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you guys know that when he called to say, I want you to teach my companies, I was the only person in the office. It was a Thursday. I'll remember this for the rest of my life. It was around 11 o'clock in the morning. And I had a huge Scottsdale digital marketing agency with nobody there and air conditioning and lights on. And all I did when I got off the phone was whimper. I'm embarrassed to say it, but it was such a big, transformational moment in the face of thinking you're about to, have all this space with no staff, and changed my life.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into your story, because, we got to hear a little bit about your childhood and how your grandpa really gave you this light, this path. And I'm really curious as we go through that story, what does your journey look like? How did you get where you are today?
Well, I'm one of these people that I always felt like I had to work a little bit harder. I had to work a little bit smarter, or a lot a bit smarter. And I had to create a series of games throughout my day because my attention was weak. And so I had to work on foundational skills and develop them. And even, so I was a talk show host. Hey, when you can't read and you can't write very well, other skills develop up on another level. And for me, it happened to be communicating. So in college, I did a lot of my tests verbally. I'm like, I didn't tell anybody this, guys, until I was like 35. I'm still embarrassed to voice it because I like to compete on the playing field. I don't like special rules. When I turned 26, I was picked up by the #1 station in Arizona to be a talk show host. And like all these dudes were like so much older than me. I was like the young pup. The only people my age were interns. And so I had a talk show on the #1 station. I was on the radio 6 days a week. I started a news site. This is 1999. Started a news site. Google News rolled out. The dominant paper in Arizona, the Arizona Republic, owned by USA Today and Gannett, didn't know about Google News. But I did. So every time there was like John McCain in the studio or the governor, Janet Napolitano, or the mayor of Phoenix, I would turn them into writers, just collect their weekly articles or their weekly speeches, and I would publish them. Then Google News picked me up as the leading news site in Arizona. And for the next 9 years, my website did crazy numbers. Like we had months we're doing 36 million visitors in a full year on zero ad dollars because of Google News. iHeartRadio found me, brought me in to run digital for 7 of their largest nationally syndicated talk shows. Because back in the day, this is 2003, 2007. If you understood radio and you understood marketing, you're like a golden child at iHeart. So I got brought there, worked on the biggest shows, all the shows. And then I burned out like on everybody's hot, fresh take of the day on news and sports and entertainment, and opened up a digital agency. And that just kind of like catapulted my whole career from that point.
I think what's so critical about it is it's the overcoming something.
Yes.
We see it with so many successful people, right? My daughter right now is applying to colleges, and like this light bulb has come on about the college essay filter, right? Like when you have to write a college essay and you have to tell your story, it's so much. If you've never encountered any difficult thing in your life and nothing to ever overcome, that essay is like impossible to write. Right. But if
fear,
you can actually,
beliefs, anxiety.
Yeah. And when you've been able to say, I've been able to overcome things, and I've been challenged here and challenged there. And my son, who's a few years younger, like in his first reaction, he's like, well, I don't really have a story. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a story? And we actually started talking through things. And all of a sudden he started to realize, I guess I did overcome this. I did overcome that. Right. And if you use that as power and as fuel for going forward, like that's where it's at.
Dude, you are spot on. Like that's the whole game. Like I have used like jetpacks on my back. The teacher who said I'd be lucky to graduate from high school, but college is out of the question, jetpack. That's fuel. Yeah. And all along the way, whenever I was able to discover how to do something my way and persevere, to your point, more fuel in the jetpack. And before I knew it, I became unstoppable. Like I'm in college and I couldn't read very well. I'd never read out loud, but I wanted to be on-air talent. I wanted to be a talk show host. And a teacher told me, how are you ever going to be a talk show host if you're not willing to read in front of people? Don't you realize that they read like all day? So I had to like gamify that. And that was fear on a whole nother level. But passion is also fuel. And when you can channel yourself or other people in their paths of passion, they can overcome anything.
So true.
So Todd, when you go through moments like that in life, there's bound to be imposter syndrome. And I tell people all the time, like, I don't care who you are, even probably Tony Robbins has had it at times. So how do you take that weakness that you recognize you had and say, you know what, I can do this? And how did you squash that imposter syndrome when that happened?
Okay, so a lot of this falls under Tony philosophy because I got immersion in it at a very early age. Here's what I know from Tony philosophy. He says repetition is the mother of skill. He also says you're rewarded in public for what you intensely practice and refine in private. So I couldn't read, but I knew I had a goal. And that goal was to be able to read in front of people confidently, like they would never know I was reading. So I had to develop the skill. I had to get into repetition. So every day after that teacher, laughed, how are you going to do this if you're not willing to read in front of people? I committed myself to a growth game, a little 2-minute game where at the beginning, I was just reading a paragraph out loud in my bedroom at my parents' house, like a trained broadcast professional would. Then I couldn't focus more than a paragraph. Then it became the entire article, and you have to pick something you're passionate about. So for me, it was sports. Sports was my gateway drug, to learn how to read. And then I was reading the whole sports page out loud. And from there, it became the whole newspaper. By the time I got into college, I was the most annoying dorm room, roommate in the entire world. And so I just developed the muscle. Like a lot of things that we stray away from becomes developed muscle. And it doesn't matter if it's serving clients and developing that muscle or optimizing your path to the magic word of yes inside of your sales process. Incrementally, can you elevate your game? So I just kept elevating the game. And in doing so, those skills developed. When you strengthen your weaknesses and develop your strengths, eventually you start like slingshotting ahead.
So you hit on something that I think is really interesting. Gamification, this is all the rage and discussion, right? But it's all, the gamification has to come from an app. I feel like so many people believe. But you talk about at a time where it was clearly not app driven, the games that you kind of created for yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of why you went down that path and how it worked?
Yeah, I actually think, and thank you for bringing this up. For those that are listening, we did not plan this. Totally spontaneous moment. But behind the scenes, I am, and I've never addressed this publicly, working on a book called Growth Games. And it's my second book. And Growth Games is really how I leveled myself up. And so you got to gamify it. You got to make it fun. If you can make it fun for yourself, then you can turn whatever it is, imposter syndrome, into a strength. So going to the imposter syndrome question, when you become a talk show host, you're talking about stuff all day that you've never spent time on. Breaking news out of San Diego, blah, blah, blah. You're like, oh, read the story, read 2 stories and talk about it from a position of authority. That's really difficult. But once you get into repetition, all of a sudden you drop your guard, and most people just stop at the sensation of imposter syndrome. So fast forward, imposter syndrome, it's all training. Fast forward all the way to like the first time I stepped on Tony's stage, 15,000 people, and the lights go on. They're putting a mic on me, and I'm on the risers in the back of the room. I finally get to see the size of the audience. And my first thought is, this is too big for me. First thought, imposter syndrome. I don't know. Maybe you bit off too much to chew this time. Yeah. So my whole walk from the risers to the backstage is all training. It's all, imagine all these people that you can impact at one time. The magnification of this moment is so exciting. Yeah, dude, but this is a lot of people. And the training kicks in. You're like, do you have something that's going to help them? Like, do you believe that what you're about to share is going to help this audience and impact their life? Because if so, you've got to rush out there and help them. So you have to build these little growth game moments, because nobody's going to coach you up at the moment like you'll coach yourself. And it's funny because I said to Tony backstage one day, I was like, dude, I think I owe you a lot of money. And he's like, really? Why? I said, man, I've got a little Tony Robbins that's like the size, of an inch, and he lives full time in my head, and he's working on my behalf. So you got to be able to monetize that or something. But really, for everybody out there, how are you coaching yourself? How are you driving yourself? How are you determining where the next level is and striving for it, and wrapping that in some kind of a little 2-minute game where you strengthen this muscle? And most people are hustling to the next event, and they turn on music when they get into the car. or they turn on sports radio or a podcast. But the most important thing you can develop is this muscle that sits between your two ears. So if you can use that downtime to exercise and strengthen, all of a sudden you're just like playing at another level. So cool.
Well, and I think the other thing that I've seen with kind of these micro games, right, that you create.
Yes.
So you create mini victories, right? Like there's so many goals that people set out that are so long term that they get frustrated and they get burned out. This is why, why do all New Year's resolutions end, right? It's because it's such a dramatic change. They're not focused on behavior and they're not clear on what it is. They don't create micro wins. They don't create that game in their head, right? And so just, what are the things that you can do to just create that little game, that little victory? And again, the light bulb went on to me when I look at, I look people around and I see, people on these phones with the games, and they're addicted to it. Right. And I get it. Like, it's science even, right? I mean, they're triggering these chemicals in their brain that are allowing them to be like, oh, I gotta get the next level. I gotta get the next coin. Right. And it's like, well, what happens if you get the next level? Well, nothing, but okay. If you can create that same exercise, and that's, to your point, that same muscle building towards a goal that you're really trying to achieve, you no longer burn out because you're constantly winning.
And you're constantly refining. You're like living in constant and never ending improvement. And you can't get stuck in depression or frustration or irritability. You're only allowed to get stuck in constant and never ending improvement. It's the only place. And just to give you a couple growth games, like my wife, we've been together for 25 years. My wife was like, dude, we're at dinner and she's like, where are you? Like mentally, I don't feel like you're here. Have you ever had that conversation? Right? I'm sure a lot of us had. So then I was like, how do I growth game that? Because it's a really easy one. And all I did was whenever we go out, I switched my chair from the one that's got the great view of the door that sees everybody coming in to the one that's got the great view of the girl that I'm supposed to be with. And then all of a sudden, all focus went in on her. And you know what happened? The date happened. It was like we had the best night ever. It was like bow, bow, chicka, bow, wow. Like it was fun because focus went in on the right goal instead of me entertaining myself on what's going on in the room. So it's like there's a zillion of them. Like I was scared to, I'm an asthmatic. What's the growth game there? This game is for me, not for anybody else. Talk to your physician. But for me, I have exercise-induced asthma. And so I just decided I'm not going to be hooked on this inhaler my entire life. I'm going to growth game out of it. So every day, or at least 3 days a week, I go outside, go on a hike, go on a run or something. And I use yet less and less of the inhaler and move it further away from my mouth each time, to the point where now my lungs are friggin' strong if I keep the growth game going.
Yeah.
Like it's endless.
I love that.
So Todd, let's talk about how do you use the growth game with your clients? And I'd be curious, you have a marketing agency, I have a strong marketing background. Whether they know it or not, how do you use it?
I love this question. Thank you. Well, we set goals and we don't hide from the goals. It's just like if you go to the gym and you write down what you did last week, and now you evaluate it from where you are. If you got to look at the goals, and in marketing, you've got to look at what your cost per acquisition is. You've got to look at how many people, let's say you're doing a webinar for the sake of discussion, how many people registered to how many people showed. And you look at those numbers and say, how do we improve them by next week? Incremental adjustments all the way to the number of people that showed up on the webinar, to those that got converted. And so once you start looking at each of the different spots as leaks, I look at it like plumbing. Leads come in way off into the distance. They come in through a pipe and they register for the webinar. Yay, we got 1,000 people, but only 30% are going to show. That's the next game. How do we the next time go from a 30% show rate to a 70% show rate? And then you gamify it across the organization. Everybody who has the opportunity to impact that drip spot, that leak where Believe it or not, that's revenue dribbling out, not to be realized, probably going to a competitor. How do we gamify that spot? So when we plug that leak and it goes from a 30% to a 70% show rate, how do we friggin' celebrate together? And then you turn that into something that's a celebration moment across the organization.
I love that.
And that's such a critical element, right? Because a game has a reward. And myself included, I'm awful at this, right? Like, because, to your point of micro games, I'm always on like, to me, the reward is just, hey, I accomplished the goal, right? Move on. But when you think about, leading organizations and leading teams, that is absolutely my Achilles heel that I focus on all the time, because I'm awful at it. Because it's like, aren't we all excited because we accomplished a goal? Well, no, can we celebrate it? Can we take a second at least just to say like, hey, we nailed it? Like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, let's have a party. Let's do it. I'm game with that.
And let's celebrate. Let's get out of our chair. Let's change the quality of energy inside of the team. So the energy is the energy of winning instead of passively sitting back. Yeah, I mean, when you say you're terrible at something, keep in mind, that's a snapshot moment. Mm-hmm. That's where it is now. But we do have that opportunity to like hustle our way to being exceptional in that area. I mean, it's choice.
100%.
Right?
So 100%.
Todd, with the gamification, I'm sure if you outwardly said to a new client, hey, we're going to gamify this, there's bound to be, especially some older clients, that'll shut that down and be like, yeah, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So how do you know when to bring it in, integrate it without maybe calling it what it actually is, to get people on board with the idea that, look, this works? Because I think it does at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, gamification works.
Gamification works. The reason it's baked into all these like online tools that are successful, like, one that I'm using right now, I don't know if you guys use Fathom, but Fathom is an app inside the Zoom app store, and it records all of your Zoom calls and transcribes it. And I just use it as a library, like of all my client calls. So if I'm like, I can't remember what was that point, I just go right back into my Fathom and I search for that moment and watch the video. But every time you go into Fathom, it has and you go and look up something in a client video, it gives you points. Ding, 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 ding. And I'm like, yo, they're gamifying the recording. And when we do that, we start using tools differently. And so going back to your question, how do you get the clients to buy in? First, it's essential for us to know what's on the scoreboard in order for us to know what's winning. What does winning look like? One of the first questions. What are we trying to accomplish in 6 months? And then once you know that, then you go in reverse and you back those numbers in. I had a client the other day, and I'm not in a lot of the agency client calls, but more, though I love them and I miss them. I was on a call with a client the other day, and we're running ads and their email list into big client. They've got 5,000 salespeople on their team. We're running ads and their email list of existing relationships into a webinar. And in doing so, we looked at the numbers and, we were all underwhelmed. So we went back to the scorecard and looked at what is which part of the pipeline is green, meaning we're hitting our goals, we're winning. Which part of the pipeline is yellow, meaning it needs some attention, little optimization, and which part of that pipeline is red. And then we make those next growth game adjustments all the way through. And before you know it, the next meeting, you're like, oh, actually, this is manageable. It goes from, when you use a scoreboard, it goes from overwhelm to identifiable areas that you can manage and then optimize. And now people can pour their attention into, what is the moment right here? People aren't showing up. Why don't we put a dude on the phone that calls them and gives them a workbook that they're going to need for this live event? Because it's going to be so invaluable. They need that workbook to get the transformation. Double check your calendar. Make sure, it's 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Is it on your calendar? Before you know it, 30% goes to 70% on the show rate, and then revenue adjusts. So I'm like, I think it just starts with the culture at the very beginning. What are we trying to hit? And then how do we have fun hitting those goals together?
Well, and the idea of the scorecard allows you to celebrate. It allows you to measure, the thing we talk about a lot, what gets measured gets done, right? And
That's right.
if we're never looking at it, and it's whether that be your Apple Watch because you need to get up and move a little bit to anything else. And I think we've seen this in so many businesses where there's so much data that they get overwhelmed,
right,
and then do nothing. They just get paralysis by analysis. Versus, it's not about how much data you have, it's about what you're doing with it, and how do you get to the most simplest data that's going to allow you to move that needle.
Yeah. It's, while we're on this topic, for everybody listening, please know, as the business leader, it's your responsibility to develop that scoreboard. If you expect somebody else, even if it isn't your niche, you're like, oh, I don't know, Todd, I'm not good at this sector. This is somebody else's department. If you're the lead and your life and your success is wrapped into this project being successful, create the damn scorecard. Work with the leaders. What are all the points? Do this at the beginning with the client. What are the points that we need to hit? Get buy-in. And you got to first organize. Then you've got to deputize. Who's leading each of these different metrics and going to report on them? And then you have to back up and supervise. And every single time I end up with a project that doesn't deliver, I screwed up in the organize spot. I didn't organize the metrics we were aiming for at the beginning. Like maybe I was juggling too much and I left it to somebody else and then was disappointed. Please know, as the leader, you've got to organize before you deputize, and then you back up and supervise.
That's brilliant. That's
It's
brilliant.
not mine. It's my stepdad of 22 years, successful entrepreneur. Every time I go and visit him and I sit in his car and we're like running errands, like the girls are shopping and the guys are going running errands, every single time he's like, tell me what's going on in your business. So then I tell him, he goes, what happened there? And we unpack that thing. It's always the same screw up. He's like, you didn't organize. I know. We can only make the same mistakes so many times before we've got to learn and evolve. And, I might sound great like a wizard, but, I stub my toe mostly in the organization area and then can't figure out why the project didn't develop.
So true. And that's common in all businesses, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people, it's an easy word for people to say is, my organization, we need to communicate better. We need to communicate better. We need to communicate better. And don't get me wrong, communication is always a thing. But I also feel like a lot of times it's just the scapegoat. And I think it's exactly what you just said. It's the scapegoat because, well, I didn't organize my thoughts. So I thought you just thought the same way I did. I thought you still 100%. Had the same perspective I did. And, myself included, as we've continued to grow as an organization, that's, the realization of at some point, you got to get your brain on paper. And if you don't get it, because to your point, if you have to organize it, you can't organize it if you're incapable of writing it down if you're not going to organize it in some way.
Right.
And so just that exercise of forcing, I just have to write it down. And if I have to write it down, then I have to organize it. And then look, that doesn't mean that there still can be communication gaps and all that sort of stuff. That's human nature. But I tell you what, I think at least half the time it's really just, there was a communication gap really because we didn't get organized on the front end.
Yeah, I have a term for it. I call it original sin. It was like you sinned before the project even got started. And then you look back in 6 months and you're like, why didn't this work? It's just, this is why every project is worthy of a kickoff meeting. And before you have the kickoff meeting, if you're the leader, even if you're not the business leader, if you inside yourself see yourself as a leader, you should come to that meeting organized. What is it that we should track in order for this to be successful instead of relying on the meeting to have it happen?
Yes.
I actually use ChatGPT a lot in this area. I'll go into a strategy session with my team and at my agency, I've got we have a strategy team filled with the most brilliant digital marketing nerds, full on nerds. And we're going to be talking about a Fortune 500 company or a aggressive startup. And I haven't had time to get my head around before I walk into the strategy and into the session. And I will play on ChatGPT with what I think is the right path for them. And in like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I could be pulling together a strategy to achieve that end goal with benchmarks, and then walk into the meeting and watch the conversation and help stoke the flames of it, but also have an outline of a strategy that I think will work. And the time involvement in me to organize those thoughts has now collapsed maybe by 90%. It's pretty cool.
So true. Yeah.
So, Todd, when you talk about organization, are we also referring to, when you say that word, I think of a plan, having a game plan or having a strategy. But when I talk to businesses, especially small businesses, I think the number one reason most of them come up short and chase their elusive goals in perpetuity is because they don't have a strategy. In other words, you're showing up to things like these projects with no rhyme or reason. Well, let's try this. Well, what about this? Well, that's not being strategic. That's not being planful or organized. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, 100%. You got to have if you're going to go on a road trip, you should know what that end goal destination is, and you should plug that into the GPS. It'll give you ways to get there. And the strategy is really the GPS. How are we going to get there? And how are we going to do it in the most efficient way? What routes are we going to take? Right? And how are we going to measure it?
So Todd, curious, as we talk about these growth games, which I can't wait for the book, by the way. So I hope it's coming soon. What's the easiest next step, right? So, someone's listening today and saying like, all right, I've got this goal and, or this gap that I'm struggling with. What are ways that you've seen that can be the easiest next step to just say, all right, how do you create that little micro game for yourself so you can move forward?
I do it all the time. And in the sales context, I think that the best salespeople are the ones that manage their prospects' 3 psychological needs. People know me for what I've done in the sales space. And I'm a marketer, but what I realized is when salespeople elevate their basic level marketing skills, meaning how they communicate and how they get the message into their prospect's head in simple, digestible terms, sales results go through the roof. So I'm a big fan of these micro moments in the sales process. I love arming sales teams and sales individuals, and this includes business leaders, with the skills to win these micro moments. Give you an example. If they're confused, the prospect, you lose, right? Like we all know that. If you confuse, they lose. So we've all been in meetings where we've detected that somebody's confused, right? We're like, man, maybe they're not smart enough to understand how I can impact them. Or maybe they are clearly not getting this. Most salespeople think that the sale happens inside the Zoom room or in the meeting, but 73% of decision makers, which is virtually all of them, will evaluate you privately when you're not there. This is LinkedIn data. So what do we do with that? If you detect confusion, instead of allowing the only time you interact with them to be in the meeting, what if you follow up with a short 3-minute video and you take a PowerPoint or a keynote and you connect the friggin' dots? Boom, boom, boom. And you do it visually because the human brain processes 60,000 times faster visually. And you put your beautiful face on camera or just your voice, and you walk them through what they couldn't grasp before when you were just doing it verbally, right? You use the dual coding theory of education. Like this is where being stuck in all these learning disability classes, where you start to realize that some of these teachers are getting phenomenal results and they're teaching things verbally and visually for a reason. When salespeople incorporate these little skills, their prospect gets it. And then they start winning at the next step. And then another point is when you go to submit a contract, a proposal, a invoice, an estimate, what if you take the same approach, recognizing that most people are scared of the risk in a business decision? What if you remove the risk off the table and you make it really easy for them to see and visualize where the project is going to go? And before you know it, that video that you created, hey, Chris, it was great talking with you. And thank you for helping me lay out this strategy. I'm going to walk you through it. And for Dustin, my name is Todd Hartley, and I've been working with Chris on laying this out. Now, all of a sudden, and you walk Dustin through, and before you know it, I haven't met Dustin. I've only met Chris, but Chris receives the video that took Chris 3 to 5 minutes to create. He emails or texts it to them. I email and text it to Chris. What ends up happening? Chris is like, oh man, I couldn't explain this as well as Todd just did. I'll send Todd's video to Dustin. And what did I just do? Like dominoes, I'm influencing the entire path to yes. When you do that, you start closing like 75% more deals. And all of a sudden, your close rate goes from something embarrassingly low that people have tolerated to something significantly higher, worthy of celebration within an organization. And that's where business becomes a lot of fun, when you start stacking wins together. Those are the micro moments that we mostly sweep under the rug.
I think that's so important, because if you stack victories, and we say this a lot, we have a planner, so I always refer to it as this. If you stack daily victories, you win the week. If you win the weeks, you win the month. If you win the months, you win the year. I know, but people overlook these micro victories. And like you and Dustin had mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't stop to celebrate and, just say, hey, congrats, high five. It might be just a deal you won. It might just be a new client. It might just be that you only got 10% more people into your webinar. But if you have all of those wins consistently, what is the outcome at the end of the year?
And when we celebrate them, like I gamify like I'm working on a big household name right now, an interview for a documentary that I'm working on. And their staff replied back to me just this morning before I was getting ready to this. And you guys would know who this person is. The email came through and I went like this. This is how I gamify even an email. Boom. Right? And I threw my hands in the air. I'm like, boom, like I'm celebrating. And if I win a deal, it's like, boom, and my staff is like, dude, he's unhinged. But what I realize is there is an energy to winning teams, and somebody's got to demonstrate that energy. And if we're stuck in this like really quiet, low energy frequency, we don't even notice the small wins that are happening. And we only start celebrating the big wins. And the big wins might take 3 months or 6 months. We need more celebrations than that.
So Todd, I'm curious, you've done a lot around different sales training and video in particular and things like that. Curious in the world of AI, there's all of this shift that's happening, avatars, and they're getting more and more realistic and things like that. Curious how you think that that's going to impact sales in the next 3 to 5 years.
Love it. I was talking with an AI guru last night over a glass of wine, and I think AI is beautiful for all the areas that you can do behind the scenes. How to prep yourself, how to organize, how to create an outline, all of these areas are beautiful. But if you're going to be using it for relationship, my buddy was like, dude, just throw a chatbot on it and let the chatbot deal with these people. I'm like, are you kidding? This is where money is made. You're going to let a chatbot determine if you're going to hit your revenue goals? Are you insane? He goes, well, when do you think that's going to happen? Because the transition will happen. And I said to him, oh, I think like maybe 5 years. And up until that point, don't allow a robot to determine if you're going to cover your bills or not. Like my attitude is when everybody is zigging, you zag. So when everybody goes to automation because they think, here's what they've done. They've made the excuse. I need to touch more people. We need more volume because it's a volume game. It's a relationship game. The closer you get to the buyer, the warmer, the more human. So when everybody zigs to AI, you should zag to warmth and believability and trust development. Because think about this. If you don't, and you expect the AI to do it, you're going to lose because everybody you're selling to, everybody's got a bullshit detector. And when they receive an email, they're like, did Chris Burns really write that? Or did his AI write it? And we're all doing it right now in our head. And when you see a video and I'm the video guy in the sales process, but if you got a video from me that had your name put into my mouth and you're expecting me to make a warm human to human connection that unlocks your wallet, you're mistaken. So instead of going to the AI, why not just go to yourself and be super present and warm and serve and distance yourself from people that are going to find out the hard way that it's not converting?
Todd, I am super passionate about this subject. And I love when I go on to LinkedIn and other platforms and I hear people talking about, oh, have you used AI yet? And have you done this? And let us help you make video. And then I look at what they're doing and I'm like, are you really suggesting that an AI video of basically a person with their lips moving is something that I want to watch?
Right.
Hell no. And if you think that someone else's clients want to watch a make-believe person talking as if they're real, hell no. Do I want to talk to a chatbot? Not any more than you want to talk to a chatbot. So why does everyone think that this topic is so sexy? I love using AI like you, but I use it very much in the same context to get things kickstarted.
Yeah.
Save me some time. But I don't think, like you, that leaving your potential sales to a robot, artificial intelligence, if you will, is going to help people, because I can tell you right now, that's a turnoff to me. And if you're thinking that, you're going to sell something for $5,000 or $10,000, to me, it's the exact opposite. I want to talk to a person.
You deserve a person.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that's a point that's very much overlooked.
A lot of times people, here's what I notice, you guys, and I may be at a Fortune 50 company and then I keep peeling back the onion on like where the problem is. A lot of people confuse efficiency with comfort. I'll give you an example. Use email to communicate with your prospects. That's our primary tool, Todd. Well, how effective is it? What do you mean? This is our primary tool for communication. Seriously, like, are people opening your emails? Let's look. What is your average open rate? Well, our average open rate is 20%. Great. What does that mean? Is that efficient? What do you mean? Todd, this is the way we communicate in business. Does it have to be? Because that means 80% of your messages are going unanswered. What if you got a little uncomfortable and learned how to text your prospects, warm relationships, start texting them? Because the difference between texting and email is night and day. 5 times higher engagement. You'll get 98% of your messages opened in 2 minutes if you text a warm prospect. I'm not talking about spamming people that are cold, but like as soon as you can, switch over to texting. And salespeople spend 41% of their day writing emails that 80% of the time nobody opens. Why are we doing that? Well, that's the way we do it. So they have confused efficiency with comfort, and they will defend comfort cloaked with being efficient or not. And then once you get them to the point where they need to sidestep and use a more effective delivery mechanism, now they start crushing their goals. Like, just to give you an idea, I'm a special advisor to the White House chairman of the president's cancer panel for the last 2 White Houses. His term just ended. And I don't ever email the dude. And Tony Robbins, I have never sent an email to Tony Robbins. Because if my inbox is a digital crime scene, what are theirs going to be like? But if I text them, I get a reply like this. So shouldn't we get comfortable using a delivery mechanism that maybe before, in the outdated perspective, was the perspective of it being personal? But isn't business personal? Like, winning is personal. So I always sidestep and get into that private area. And by the end of this call, we're all going to be texting buddies because we'll get direct delivery. Right?
Well, it's interesting. I also think everyone's forgetting about the for every action, there's a reaction. So, you guys kind of alluded to this, right? If everyone moves to these chatbots and AI and things like that, I was having a conversation with someone literally this morning. And they're like, okay, so at what point then is there a technology that allows me to screen out the chatbots?
Absolutely.
I think about your email, right? I mean, already there's smart technology that allows you to filter the emails that are junk as opposed to the emails you actually are getting from somebody that's a human, right? And it's not perfect, and it's only going to get better. But like, to me, I think that's the other thing that is getting so missed is every action has a reaction.
Yep.
And to your point, in history, it's always leaned towards more human.
Always. I mean, would you ever, hey, you guys committed relationships? If you were single, would you ever allow a chatbot to mingle on your behalf? Of course not. Why would we do that in business?
Yeah. It's tremendous. I love it.
That's a great point. Todd, this has been a great conversation, and certainly a little outside the box from a lot of our normal topics of general business and leadership. But before we let you off the hook, tell our audience a little bit more about what you have going on and where they can find you.
Yeah. So, I dropped a #1 best-selling book. And I want to make available to everybody in your audience the audiobook and the ebook. Just as a gift, one of the things I love is how do business leaders accelerate revenue? My book, Accelerating Yes, will be available to all of you. And all you have to do is go to toddhartley.com/book, and you'll get access to that audiobook and the ebook. I teach businesses all the time, but I also teach in online trainings how to accelerate revenue and how to win a freakish amount of deals. And so those trainings go on. I also teach people how to become the rock star of their industry, how to step out using video and AI and technology to create your content. Nobody needs any video editing skills anymore. Let the AI do it. You can create inspirational posts like you see Gary Vee drop or, Amy Porterfield drop. You can create 45 of those in 40 seconds. So I teach people how to do that, which allows them to stand out, open up their wings in their space and become the leading authority, and then move that lead to the next step where I teach you how to close it. And that's kind of like my business related universe. toddhartley.com is where to go. And the book is just /book.
Love it. Todd, thanks so much for being here. Great conversation. Can't wait to have you back. For all the listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to another episode. We appreciate the ears. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.